So the chief content officer has asked me to make a video because it's been a little while since anything's come out, and he was planning on interviewing the author about his write-up of Wrestlemania 41, but it's taking him a long time. He was kind of thrown off by the surprise ending, the kind of disappointing finish, and it's had him searching for a broader pattern to decipher about the future of professional wrestling. He's really excited about it, but it's just taking him a lot longer than last year to write up his thoughts. Last year was such a, closed case, clear-cut kind of story that it made commenting on it very easy. This one was a lot more difficult to understand. So he's been writing a lot of things about it, taking it in a lot of different directions, and it's probably a little chaotic, but we'll see what comes from that. But I also watched the match, and because it was sort of a disappointing finish, I guess. It's interesting. The disappointing finish actually caused me to be more interested in the follow-up and seeing what's going on and listening to what other people thought about it and their complaints and things like that. And so I've been following a little bit what happens on the shows that came after WrestleMania and the storylines and where they're going. And it's really interesting because one thing that some critics, younger critics, YouTube kind of like, I don't know, just people that are in the content creation like biz have been saying it's boring and they're disappointed with everything that's happening. But for me, there was a really compelling arc to the story that followed up with WrestleMania, because of course the big thing of it is that John Cena, who was like the kids role model cartoon character good guy for 20-something years, never turned heel really. Now he did. Now he turned heel and he's a bad guy now, and what's come of that. And he beats Cody, who's the champ and who was the good guy, and now who's gonna face him? And what has developed is a little bit of this storyline with him and Randy Orton. And I didn't know a ton about Randy Orton before, in my 30-year gap of knowledge. But looking up and stuff, he's kind of done a face and a heel thing back and forth, mostly I think a heel. And especially he has a long rivalry with John Cena. And since John Cena has always been a babyface, always been a good guy, Randy has always played the heel in opposition to John Cena. But with Cena being a bad guy, now Randy is kind of forced to move into a babyface role. And the thing that's really interesting is what they drew upon to do that. Because these wrestling gimmicks, these personas, they only really work, they're only really believable to the degree that they are somewhat rooted in reality. And Cena's heel turn, I think, is probably a very temporary thing, and it's very rooted in emotions. It's rooted in real emotions, but he's kind of stirring them up. And so what he's feeding off of is he's kind of stirring up this long-running resentment of, he had to go out there and be the good guy, and while the young kids loved him for that, the people that as they grew older, or the older fans, they would make fun of him, and it was always this John Cena sucks thing, and he was a guy to make fun of. And so, but part of his role in being that hero, that babyface, was just to ignore that. He could not confront the fans. He had to always be smiling for the fans. And now it's kind of his turn to express his anger and frustration and resentment towards the fans. And so that's very rooted in emotions, and I think it's something that I'm guessing at the end of his final season here, that's the sort of thing that someone can repent of, that he was temporarily overcome by the desire to give in to these feelings, and then he can see the light and realize that he made a mistake and he was wrong, and he loves the fans and he loves wrestling and all that, which I think is probably just the truth anyway. But for Randy, the interesting thing is that before he had any interaction with John Cena on the Monday night show after WrestleMania, he blew up a little bit for this kind of viral TikTok that somebody did. And I don't see how this really could have been, any kind of work, because it was like regular people that happened to see him in the hotel lobby, and they were talking about him, and he was asking him about their experience watching WrestleMania. I don't know if it was in between night 1 and night 2, and they were saying that they had spent some obnoxious amount of money for their seats, and they weren't even that good of seats, like they weren't even on the floor. And then he was asking, well, how much are the seats, the decent seats? And somebody was saying, oh, they were going for like $30,000 for the weekend. And he was like, that's crazy. And then he said, that's embarrassing. I can't believe that. So, that's the sort of thing where it's like, well, whoa, what's the company going to do? Well, the company is kind of in this interesting place creatively where the WWE has been bought by this parent company, the TKO company that also owns UFC. And so, in a sense, from a creative standpoint, all of the blame for the advertisements everywhere and commercializing everything, it's very easy to just say, oh, that's because of the TKO thing. And so then TKO can be the bad guy. They're changing wrestling. It's making it too expensive. It's out of touch with the fans, the normal fans, the families. So when Randy Orton confronts John Cena, he tells him that the reason why he's angry and what he's going through, he says that what he's learned is that you gain a lot of perspective when you become a father and you have kids. And then John Cena says, how dare you parent shame me? You have kids and you love them. Congratulations. And he says, you know why I haven't had kids? The real reason is because I've spent the last 25 years raising yours. And then he picks on some 6-year-old kid in the audience and calls his dad a loser and all this stuff. And so at this point, he's made Randy Orton a babyface. And the interesting thing is that Cena's heel turn is temporary. But this face turn for Randy Orton is in many ways permanent. Because what is it rooted in? It's rooted in his experience now. He's 45 years old. He's married. He's got kids. It's his experience as a father. And realizing wow, I can do things with my family because I'm wealthy, because I'm a WWE wrestler. But, he grew up, his dad was a wrestler too, and his grandfather. But wrestling wasn't as lucrative back then. So, he kind of grew up middle class, I would say. And, so he has enough rootedness in reality to understand that the prices of these things are ridiculous. And so then he kind of follows up the next week talking about how John Cena comes out with a new gimmick every month with a new color t-shirt, a new wristband, and new toys, and all these things to sell, to merchandise, and saying that this is taking advantage of the kids because, if the parent is able to scrape together the money to bring their son or their family to a wrestling show, the kid's going to see that merchandise and he's going to want something to take home. He's going to want something from his hero, and he's going to want the whole thing, the hat and the t-shirt and the wristbands and the headbands and what is that doing? And as a parent, I know this because every time you go to something that's these commercialized events for kids, they just try to nickel and dime you to death over this parental guilt of your kid is going to see something and they're going to be excited about it and they're going to want it, and then you have to be the bad guy. You have to be the heel, and you have to tell your kid, no, we can't afford that. I'm sorry, you cannot have every piece of plastic junk that has been designed to entice your 7-year-old, 5-year-old, 3-year-old eyes with wonder, and now everything has blinking LEDs in it or whatever. So like that is, so basically he's become just about the most compelling wrestling character that a person like me, a dad of 3 kids in my 40s now, can relate to. And so whatever the long-term plan is for like wrestling, it seems like this indicates at least somewhat of a turn back towards wanting to establish a fan base for the next generation, to make it more family oriented. And I think that really goes with a lot of the spirit of the age, as you could say, that there is this positive turn in entertainment and a lot of things towards family values and things like that. Obviously towards Christianity and the gospel as well. But, as I said, the interesting thing about that is this, unlike Cena's kind of turn toward being a bad guy, which you could say is rooted in a kind of temporary emotional state, this change from bad guy to good guy is permanent because it's rooted in reality. He's not going to cease being a father. He's not going to cease from having been this guy that stood up for the working class moms and dads, the people on a budget, and go to become somebody who's just trying to rip everybody off. So he's kind of taken on this role, but it's so rooted in reality that it's not hard for him to sell that. It's very honest and compelling and interesting. So I think that is pretty interesting, and also just how wrestling, whether you're watching it, I think whether you're watching it as a fan or you're going, or for the people who participate in it as well, it is supposed to be this transformative kind of media. It's not supposed to be pure entertainment. And I think that's why for now, the business has gone through these cycles of more aimed towards kids, more aimed towards, the 18 to 35, and then gone back again, because there is a sort of aspect of it where you turn away from it as a kid, but then you're going to come back to that kid-friendly version of it when you become an adult and you become a father, and that's a good thing. That's a perennial thing, but it has that cycle of going through eras and stages and things like that. And so that's my prediction in some sense of what the next era of wrestling will be. I think in some aspect it has to be a more of a family-friendly thing. I think it also may have to be returned more to its archetypal symbolic roots and perhaps separate from the more like hyper-realistic way that the level of athleticism, those things have gone back, because in some sense that detracts from the storytelling, or it limits what kinds of stories can be told in a way that the older, more cheesier, slower paced way of wrestling did not limit the stories that could be told to the same degree. So those are my thoughts. Keep your eyes on the channel here. That writing will come out, and then there will be some sort of an interview probably with the author about what his discoveries are, and I think it'll be pretty interesting. So thanks for your time.